Hey everybody, it's Mrs. Shevchik here, and today we are going to be applying the rules for dividing integers to help us now divide rational numbers. The steps for dividing fractions and mixed numbers when you have negatives are exactly the same as dividing fractions and mixed numbers when they're all positive. The only difference at the end is you have to pay attention to the sign you put on your final answer. So quick review here. In order to divide fractions, we need to make sure that they're written first as improper fractions. We can't have mixed numbers. We need to rewrite them as improper fractions first. Same thing goes if you have integers. So if you have a whole number like 5, you need to rewrite that as 5 over 1 to have the rest of these steps work out for us. All right, then our second step is we are going to multiply by the reciprocal of the second number. All right, some of you guys have told me that you like the method of keep the first number the same, change division to multiplication, and flip the second fraction to its reciprocal. So I hear you guys say keep, change, flip, and if that helps you remember the rules for dividing fractions, go ahead and keep using that. And then our final step, one that sometimes gets forgotten, is to make sure that we simplify our answer. All right, so let's see what this looks like. All right, page 213 in your book shows you this example. Now, the first step here I don't need to worry about because I already have them written as fractions. So I'm not going to do anything about writing them as improper fractions. Then I look at it and, the first number stays the same. So negative 2/3. And then I'm going to change division to multiplication, and I need to flip the second number or rewrite it as its reciprocal. And so now, instead of negative 2/3 divided by 1/9, I have negative 2/3 times 9 over 1. And then I follow my rules for multiplying, which say you go straight across. And I get 2 times 9, which is 18. And then I have 3 times 1, which is 3. And then I have this negative times a positive, gives me a negative answer. And I can simplify this even further by dividing 3 out of both the top and the bottom, and I get an answer of negative 6 over 1, or just negative 6. All right, now it's your turn to practice. I'd like you to open your book to page 214 and try the check that's located on that page. Pause the video, show your steps, and then hit play when you're done so you can see how you did. All right, so the answer on this one is negative 1/14. If you got that answer, you can continue on to the next problem. If you didn't, pause the video with my work here and compare your steps to mine. If you got an answer of negative 6 over 84, you're not wrong, you're just not quite finished yet. So you want to make sure that you simplify that by dividing your fraction down to lowest terms. This next example comes from page 214 in your textbook. Now we're looking at two mixed numbers. So first step, we need to turn them both into improper fractions. So I do 5 times 4 plus 2, and I get 22/5. And since that was a negative, I'm going to bring my negative down. And then I'm dividing by 2 times 15 is 30, plus 14 is 44/15. And again, I had a negative, so I need to bring that negative down. So I've got them both written as improper fractions. Now I need to multiply by the reciprocal. So that first number stays the same, negative 22/5, but I change my division to multiplication and I flip that second number. It doesn't matter if you keep the negative on top, on bottom, or if it stays out front. I'm just going to keep it up on top there. That part really doesn't matter at all. And then I'm going to solve by either multiplying straight across, or what I would actually prefer to do is I'm going to simplify before I multiply. So I can divide 22 out of those two diagonals, right? 22 goes into 22 once, 22 goes into 44 twice. And I see another set of common factors here. I can divide 5 from the bottom and 5 from the top. It goes in there 3 times, and by doing that, it makes my multiplication much easier to do. So now when I'm doing this, I can just multiply across the top. I've got 1 times 3, which gives me an answer of 3. And then on bottom, I have 1 times 2, which is 2. and then I go back and I check my sign, we had a negative divided by a negative in the beginning, so we know that our answer will end up being positive. And so I can either leave it as 3/2 or I can rewrite it as 1 1/2. Either one of those would be an acceptable answer on this one. Now, if you had multiplied straight across 22 times 15 and 5 times 44, that would have been totally fine, but you'd have a really big numerator and denominator, and you'd have to simplify it till you got back down to this answer in the end. So now it's your turn to check. Try the example on page 214. This is at the bottom of that page. Pause the video, see how you do, come back, hit play, and check your work. All right, so when we divide these two mixed numbers, we end up with an answer of -5/8. All right, if you got it right, you can continue. If you got it wrong, retrace your steps and compare it to mine to see how you did. All right, our final example that we'll do together here is example 3 from page 216 in your book. And this one asks you to evaluate A divided by B if A equals 3/4 and B equals -0.05 or -5/100. All right, so this one also gives us two ways to solve it. Method 1, we're going to show how we can solve it keeping the numbers as decimals. And method 2, we're going to evaluate it with the numbers written as fractions. All right, so for method 1, if we have A divided by B, that means we need to take our value of A, which is 3/4, and divide that by the value we have of B, which is -0.05. All right, at this point, it tells me to turn these into decimals, so I'm going to take that 3/4 and rewrite that as decimal form, 0.75, because 3 divided by 4 is 0.75. So instead of 3/4 on top, I'm going to write it like this, and then on bottom, that one stays the same. And now I can grab my calculator and do 0.75 divided by -0.05, or I can work it out here. I'll do it by hand. I'm a math teacher and I should. There we go. We slide our decimal twice over, put it up here in the answer. 5 goes into 7 once. Bring that down. 5 goes into 25 5 times. All right, and so this ends up giving me an answer of 15, and then it was a positive divided by a negative, so we get an answer of -15. Now an alternate method of solving this would have been to turn them both into fractions first, and that would work just as well. Instead of having this written as -0.05, we'll write it as its fraction form. Since that number is read as -5/100, that actually is our fraction. All right, I could simplify that, and I'm actually going to right away. I know those two are both divisible by 5, so I'm going to make this a little easier to work with and say that's -1/20. All right, so now I start again. I do A divided by B, where A is 3/4 and B is -1/20. All right, I know that looks a little complicated. We've got a complex fraction there. But that just means 3/4 divided by -1/20. So I'm going to write it this way now, 3/4 divided by -1/20. That looks a lot more similar to what we've been doing. And now I just follow our normal rules where that first number stays the same. Division turns to multiplication, and we have to multiply by the reciprocal of that second number. And now I just multiply straight across. I do 3 times, and actually I'm going to simplify before I multiply. I'm going to divide 4 out of the bottom and divide 4 out of the top. And so my new problem is 3 times 5, which is 15, over 1 times 1, which is 1. And I had a positive times a negative, and so I get a negative answer of -15/1 or -15. And you'll notice we get the same answer whether we do it as decimals or fractions, so it'll really be up to you to decide which method you prefer, as long as they end up being terminating decimals like these were. All right, final one for you now. Please pause. You're going to work out this problem, which can be found on page 216 in your textbook. Pause the video, try this yourself, pay attention to detail and precision, and then hit play to check and see how you did. All right, how did you do on this one? I showed you 2 different methods of doing it. You were only expected to do it one way. If you worked it out as a decimal, which I think would be a way more efficient method on this one, you would get an answer of 2.85. And the reason I rounded it is my directions told me this time, hey, if you want to use a decimal form, make sure you round it to the nearest hundredth. So that's 2 decimal places. It was all right that I did it because it told me that I could. Otherwise, I would have had to use the fraction form, which you can see took me a lot longer, but I'd still get to that same answer of 2 and 41/48. All right, if you have questions on any of these, please make sure to check in with me and let me know, and I'd be happy to go through it with you. Otherwise, it's time to do some practice.